Hello, my name's John Harrison. I'm a near-natural beekeeper. I started in the conventional way and started to challenge the training that I was given. So my question to Will, you've covered some of Gareth's points, and you've talked about educating and understanding and gaining real knowledge of the bees. Is the problem the fact that we are training new beekeepers in a method which involves, in my area, which has got a lot of rate, take all the honey off and replace it with sugar syrup, suppress queens by squashing queen cells, cutting them out, doing everything they can to suppress queens, and opening the hives every week just to go through them really they're just looking to see the queen. They're not actually going into the hive to see anything, but they're being trained rather than educated. So the question is, are we training people rather than educating?
The short answer to that, John, is no. I do basic training. I go down to our teaching apiary and help out. I lead a study group for the modules. I seem to be doing this all the time, and in between, particularly during the beekeeping season, I get phone calls. Do I teach people to take all the honey? No. And I don't know anybody who does. Do I teach squashing queens? I know of one trainer who does squash queens, but he's the one who imports and does no queen rearing himself. Do I teach opening hives every week? Some of my colonies have gone 4 months without being opened. So I consider myself as a conventional, traditional beekeeper, and I'm doing many of these things that the natural beekeeping community are training as new discoveries. I would postulate that they're not. They are basically good practice. And again, I think we've got more in common. On the question of training rather than education, actually, my view is neither. I think every beekeeper, once they have their own bees in their own apiary, is their own expert. They can't or shouldn't use a mobile phone to say, what do I do? Help. They are their own expert, and beekeeping is all about learning and possessing that knowledge. I feel strongly about that, having been in education for much of my life.
Thank you for that, Will. I was going to say something to Gareth in as much as if you don't open your hives when you're training people that are wanting to know about bees and what they do, how do you educate them?
First of all, it's a great deal you can tell about the state of the hive by observing the behaviour of bees at the entrance. And secondly, you can have observation windows in your hive, and you can tell a great deal by just quickly opening the cover on the observation window and looking into the hive. And you can have either observation windows which look at the ends of the comb, or you can have an observation window which looks at the face of the side of the comb. And when you do that, and just look occasionally, briefly, you realise how dynamic the inside of the hive is. And when I said one sometimes has to go into a hive, it's a little bit like when you take an animal to the vet. There's a great deal that you can tell by looking at the general demeanour of the animal. Occasionally, it is necessary to go in. And occasionally, you do actually have to open the hive and look further. You know, if you, for example, you suspect a hive is queenless, you know, one may well have to go a little further to confirm that. I take the point entirely that this is a learning exercise for the beginner. And here I agree completely that when you're in your apiary with your bees, you are on a long-term learning curve. This is not a quick fix. This is not something you learn in a week or a month or a season. I am still learning nearly 45 years after I started keeping bees. Every single year I discover something about bees that changes my view of bees. And I think all I can say is that one needs to develop skills of observation, which are general skills of observation, not necessarily specific to beekeeping. And you know, it's like the cat. You know when your cat isn't well because it just doesn't look right. And you go to the vet and the vet says, well, what's wrong with it? You say, well, I don't know what's wrong with it, but it just doesn't look right. It doesn't feel right. It's not eating its food in its normal way, and so on and so forth. And if you look at the whole hive as being the organism, you start to learn to read the whole hive, not to act as a surgeon, constantly taking it apart. And the BBKA does teach weekly inspections. I'm not saying everybody does it, but it's not a straw, I'm not saying I'm a corn dolly, I'm simply commenting on what is, if you like, official policy.
Jonathan Powell. I live with bees. I don't mind the term natural beekeeping, but if you want to label it, is that right? I kept bees when I was 10, and we could get easily 80 pounds out of a national hive without any problem. Now I'm 50, and we can get only about 40, and the queens no longer mate reliably. They're in serious decline. So my question is, what are both sides doing to campaign against neonicotinoids and the things that are causing the decline of bees? Because I really do believe they're declining. When is the BBKA going to campaign against neonicotinoids? That's it.
Jonathan asked when the BBKA is going to campaign against neonicotinoids. Well, I'm a member of the BBKA, Oxfordshire, and they are dead against neonicotinoids and have been saying so for ages, and the national level just isn't listening. So the answer to Jonathan's question for me personally is I haven't got a clue.
I think it actually opens up a bigger issue which goes beyond tonight, but I think it's common ground, quite frankly. I personally have no confidence in the way the BBKA is structured with its virtually Victorian style of one man out after another having an ego trip for a few years, and it creates a short-termism. And the BBKA needs to start putting its money where our mouth, putting its money where, no, hang on, put its mouth where our money goes, and start listening to beekeepers generally, and not listening to the biochemical industry and so on. I must...
Here, very good.
I think we're on common ground here.
Yes.
I would just defend the BBKA. It's so happened out of laziness I didn't unpack my teaching stuff from my bag. And here's the basic syllabus. And Gareth, I'm afraid the syllabus for the basic says the reasons for our opening colony. I can find nothing about teachers weekly. I acknowledge that a large number of conventional trainers may do that, but on that issue, I don't think it is as strict as you claim.
Thanks. My name is Brian Bertram. I'm the Stroud Beekeepers Association. I've been keeping bees on a small scale between 1 and 5 hives for the last 37 years, with varying success. I suppose I would call it mainstream beekeeping that I've been doing rather than traditional. As a sort of professional zoologist or scientist, there are two things I would particularly want. One is a decent definition. What are we talking about in terms of natural beekeeping, and just what is the difference between what you're calling natural beekeeping and what we're calling mainstream beekeeping? And the other thing is that most decisions one would usually want to base on data. And I would love to see, and I hope there is available somewhere, through the BBKA, if at all possible, data on what are the sort of average amounts over a period of years from a hive, from an average hive being managed on a natural beekeeping way from a mainstream way. And after all, the honey yield is one of the main reasons why most beekeepers are keeping bees. We'd love some data.
There lies the rub.
Thank you. You said honey yield is one of the main reasons beekeepers keep bees. The reason people ought to be keeping bees today in the modern world, in my view, is to pollinate crops and to keep and have healthy bees.
Yes.
Frankly, we have so abused the honeybee worldwide, and excuse me if I feel emotional about this, but we don't deserve honey. And honey is these days treated as a commodity. You can buy it stacked high on the shelves at the supermarket. Until we go back to treating honey as a precious gift and something to be revered, we are not going to save the honeybee. And that's part of the mindset that I'm talking about. And essentially, really, that's how I would answer your question. The mindset that is behind natural beekeeping. And natural beekeeping is a broad spread of behaviours, but the mindset is that actually the bees are there to be treated as something rather special. They're not something to be exploited for man's benefit or in any shape or form. And they are an essential part of our ecosystem. They are there to pollinate crops. They are an essential part of our food production system. And that is how we should be seeing them. Honey production is entirely an incidental byproduct, and as a result, most natural beekeepers do not measure the amount of honey they take. I took honey this year, I sold some honey this year. I don't know how much honey I took because I deliberately do not weigh it or measure it because it gives me the wrong mindset. Does that answer your question?
Not quite. It would seem to me that anybody can put up empty boxes in our land and encourage lots of wild colonies. If that's natural beekeeping and you're not getting honey from it, good for you. I mean, let's do that, let's all do that. But there are other people who also want to keep these fascinating animals well and get some honey out of it at the end. So, no, there is... I don't think one can say that natural beekeeping, or that we should judge it on the basis of whether any honey should be extracted or not.
But where would you put the two factors then? Getting honey or having healthy bees? Which do you think is the most important?
They're both.
I think I come in as piggy in the middle here. I almost totally agree with Gareth, but I'd add in, and I'm addressing this to the questioner who is a professional zoologist, this is a classic multivariate thing. And if I come back to my sniper BBKA, in 2007 the BBKA made great play of its winter loss survey. Yes, last winter we lost almost exactly the national or UK average at about 38%. What that winter loss survey does not talk about is the summer gains. And our summer gains in 2013 were 78%. So our colonies went from 55 October 2012, 85 in October 2012, down to about 55 in April of this year. And they're now on, last time I looked and counted, 92. But we peaked at something like 110. And I did something that many small-scale hobbyists would never do, which was take one look at a colony. Sometimes I agreed with Gareth before I'd even opened it, and I simply dumped those, or rarely I might destroy them. And that may seem cruel to the individual bees, but remember Gareth spoke of the colony as a unit, and if I'd got a pet dog and it was ailing and in pain, I might put it down, and that might be the best thing to do. So I will reduce my number of colonies. So I will put it to our 37 years a beekeeper friend back there and say, how do you measure what you mean by the number of colonies? Because your hobbyist who desperately tries to keep each colony going, have you got a spare queen? Can I throw in some bees, mix that swarm with that colony? Things that I wouldn't do. They're making the baseline numbers very clear. We spend the rest of the evening designing the experiment that would answer the question. But I think there are so many reasons for keeping bees and so many ways of doing it that it's incredibly complex.
Can I just say, I think The majority of people here are hobby beekeepers with 1 to 3 or 4 hives. I think these two gentlemen on the left have kept sort of hundreds of hives. I'm not sure that natural beekeeping methods could work commercially.
Yes, they do.
Of course they can. I mean, you just go down the extensive route rather than the intensive route. And as I said, it's a mindset. I have lots of hives. Heidi has lots of hives, and I agree with Will. Death is part of life. If you have an alien colony, then you have an alien colony. You let it go. And part of the problem you have is if you have 2 hives and you have to let one of them go, that hurts you. It pains you, and therefore you tend to do everything you can to prop it up. And I was having a discussion with a regional bee inspector only recently on this subject. He looked at me and said, "Oh, so you take the same sort of rather hard view that bee farmers or commercial beekeepers take. If a colony is ailing, it goes." But that's part of the selection process. That's part of how you get to healthy bees. You do not prop up bee colonies that cannot support themselves. So now I agree with Will, and I'm wondering if maybe he should become a trustee of the Natural Beekeeping Trust, since we vehemently oppose neonicotinoids. And also, he's supporting quite a lot of other things we stand for. So maybe we need a third motion.
It certainly is an evening of education.
My name's Robin Morris. I'm relatively new to the world of bees. I started in 2009, and so I came to it with no baggage whatsoever. Unfortunately, I trawled the internet and found that there were options. I went down the natural route, having looked at the options. But I did join the BBKA for the first 2 years, and I was a member of the Avon BBKA. And I got to a stage where, I think it was in 2011, the neonicotinoid issue was at full stage. And I got to a stage where I had to leave the BBKA. I thought, well, why should my money support that? The county association would not allow me just to pay the part that belonged to them. I had to come out. I was either in or I was out. So, Will, my question, so after that preamble, my question was addressed at you. I have full respect for what you're saying. I think what you said about your comments, your criticisms of the BPK resounds among a lot of natural beekeepers. The question has to be that if you've got an organisation that is providing training courses that, and things that you don't agree with, why don't people in your situation vote with your feet like I do and stop financing this and force the change?
Thank you. I take that as a very personal question. I'm not offended by it, but I need to answer it personally.
People like yourself. Sorry.
Yeah. No offence. It is possible to move forward in small ways. And in this, I'm scanning the room for people who would create damage out of this, but I can't see anybody. I was once asked to join the BBK executive. During the delegates meeting, I realised that I had been used to pack the executive. And before the votes were taken, I withdrew. And some people must have thought I was very bizarre. But the really bizarre people were the people who were manipulating to manage the executive. Now, oddly, I no longer believe that everybody in beekeeping is nice. I've got nothing against our natural beekeepers. I'm thinking of individuals who I've met along the way. Dave here has particular reasons to know exactly who I'm talking about at times. So I'll speak as I find, and actually many of the people involved in the BBKA exams, which even the bee farmers accept as a standard, there are good people creating good works. And to a large extent, one has to stay within the gap. The First World War is hitting the headlines, and my grandfather was in it. And if I tell you that he wrote to my grandmother about his own funeral, dwell on that for a second and think. I'm quite interested in the centenaries that are coming up. And if you're in the British Army, the way is not to walk away. But his advice was, you obey the orders, but you choose when and where you carry them out. And that was his recipe for survival. So there is an argument for staying in the army or in BBKA and working within the system. And I recently decided, having ruled out taking any BBKA exams, that I would take them because then I can speak with some authority. And so I'm now spending 2 or 3 years seeing how far I can go. And if I do reach the dizzy heights of advanced beekeeper and or NDB, if I then criticise BBKA, the people who could rubbish me, if I don't hold those qualifications, have lost the string to their bow. So I'm, as it were, staying in fighting, but I respect you leaving and fighting. I think both strategies are valid.
Dave wants to have the last word before I
Just a little point of order, really. I should hate this to develop into something for or against the BBK. Yes.
Sorry?
I'm interested in beekeeping. What the BBK have got to say about beekeeping doesn't often agree with me.
Right.
And unfortunately, tonight, neither does the